when you first start, it tends to be about money, finances, making ends meet. Now it's like, okay, there's so many things I could do and so many passions I've kind of grew and hobbies I joined as I went through my career. I wish I had more time to invest myself into all of them. So, hey, if I can replace some of the less favorable parts of my job with automation, I am happy.
GovCon has a language of its own. Acronyms, compliance, contracting. And when you're new, well, it can feel a little bit like alphabet soup.
And let's be real, no one hands you a decoder ring. We're your hosts, Amanda Ziede and Camille Tudi, and we're here to get real about how people actually break in, level up, and lead in government contracting.
Because not everyone grows up dreaming about government contracts. Some people take big swings, leaving stable jobs to join a startup without a single contract in place.
Today's guest did exactly that. As the first employee of a brand new company, he got the full startup experience, building a team from the ground up, making mistakes, and learning what growth really means.
And he'll be the first one to tell you those mistakes were necessary. His mantra is fail fast, fail often, because that's the best way to internalize the lessons and keep moving forward.
And that willingness to take risks, learn from failure, and grow through trial and error is what shaped his career in GovCon leadership.
Okay, let's get into it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Rookies to Rockstars, the short, sharp series where we ask bold, smart people one thing. What do you know now that you wish someone had told you on day one?
We are your hosts, Camille Tudi and Amanda Ziede. Today, we're talking with Andrzej Gorski, Senior Vice President of Electronic Systems at 26 Technologies. He's led teams at Lockheed Martin, survived startup chaos, and now runs one of the fastest growing units at 26. Andrzej, welcome. Can't wait to dive in.
Good morning. How are you guys?
We're doing great.
So you started as a computer engineering major back in 1999. And as a proud member of Generation X, I feel Asian just saying that out loud. So did you come from a family of engineers, or what led you to choose that path?
Honestly, I think it was, if I backtrack a little bit, I immigrated here with my family back in 89. I was born in Poland. My whole family comes from Poland. Times were kind of tough. And when we came here, it was a sudden shift to myself and my siblings. And as we were getting acclimated to what America and the United States is, learning the language, because we didn't even speak the language when we came over, going through the school system, there was a lot of hardship. And we were very frugal and not financially well off when we first came over, because we had to basically restart a whole life when we moved here. So the goal was like, hey, let's pick a discipline that has the potential to create a good lifestyle for us as we grow up and for our family. My dad was a doctor, so he was in the medical field, although unfortunately coming over from Poland, they did not acknowledge his MD here because it was different education. We're like, hey, you'll have to redo it all from scratch. So for us, it was, okay, let's try to make a good lifestyle and find jobs that have that potential. And I guess my siblings and I always had a predisposition towards mathematics, so engineering kind of came as a natural potential future career.
That sounds like an easy field to get into, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know, study English or something. That's a little bit easier. But you had clearly the DNA from your dad. He was a doctor, so.
The other part of it is, it was early 90s. It was the .com era, and as we were growing up in elementary school, the internet didn't exist. Through the middle into high school, suddenly you have AOL.com come up. And you have VCRs, and you have better and high definition TVs come. So engineering was like, hey, all this technology is really cool. I wonder how it works. Well, let's learn about computer engineering and all this associated disciplines.
Mm-hmm. Math is kind of like a universal language too. Everyone, says often. So it might be, it's more universally like 1 + 1 is 2 everywhere. So I can imagine maybe with computer engineering, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know, but the rules may be similar no matter where you are.
Correct. And that's one of the things, like I said, when we came over from Poland, we didn't speak English really well. I knew how to say 1 through 8, maybe, count numbers, but math was still the same as it was over there. So.
Well, it's funny hearing you guys talk a lot about these generational technological differences. I vaguely remember Napster, so I feel a little less ancient as a millennial, but only slightly. So once you got into the field, what's one thing that you wish someone had told you about building a career in tech, something that would have saved you maybe a few rookie mistakes early on?
I would say a lot of it comes to just don't overanalyze. As we're younger and grow up, especially as we're trying to make a name for ourselves and establish a career or a reputation, we tend to second guess and honestly overanalyze how it is received. Do I really understand the technology? How invested should I become in trying to master a domain? And as we know now, looking back over the last 2 decades or so, technology changes very rapidly right now. Things that at some point you thought are going to be the major paradigm shifts in how we do our work don't even exist anymore. Everything is moving into cloud computing. AI is on the horizon. That's potentially a huge influence on the type of work we do in the workplace. So all that time I spent over analyzing, second guessing, running through scenarios in my head as to, hey, you really should invest in this because in 5 years this is going to happen. Well, it didn't happen as we planned. So there was a lot. I'm not saying it's bad to consider possibilities and plan for various, things that might happen throughout a lifetime so that you're prepared. But you shouldn't try to, dot every I, cross every T, because you're probably going to get it wrong anyways and going to have to rethink it.
One thing that we talk about a lot on this podcast is those moments when we realized that we made a mistake and it was mortifying and it felt like career ending in those early days. Do you have one of those?
I mean, honestly, all of the mistakes I've made, I feel like I had to make them to learn from them. I'm one of those folks. And I actually, currently the team I run, a lot of those folks, I try to, encourage that behavior is fail fast, fail often, just learn from your mistakes, because the best way to internalize a lesson is by failing at it and actually realizing, because on paper, in theory, sometimes it's easy, like, oh, if this doesn't work out, here's what I should do. But then actually doing it, it kind of takes a more personal toll in somebody's life, or at least in the work ethic. I guess at the midpoint in my career, this is my second job probably after graduating college, I chose to leave what I would say a stable, promising career, because I really had the itch to say, well, could I grow my own business? And I actually went to a startup. I wasn't the founder. I was probably the next best thing. I was the first employee they hired. The two founders started the company maybe a month before I started. They didn't even have the first contract yet. So I got the full experience. And I think in some ways, while, again, I don't mind making mistakes because I learned from them and I needed to make them, it taught me what it means to really build a team from the ground up. In the end, it ended up being a mistake because I am no longer there. I learned very, very hard that being the first employee is still very different than being a founder when it comes to making decisions and having voting power in a company's trajectory. But no regrets, honestly.
Would you say your career path has been more trial and error rather than intentional upward momentum? Or how would you kind of describe that mindset that you took as you shifted back and forth?
A lot of it is trial and error. Again, we try to pre-plan some things and pre-conceptualize. Here is an ideal career path. I think there's a quote from Tyson saying, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, and then you have to kind of replan because something happened that shook you. So it is a lot of trial and error. And even today, I'm running a larger team, and every day I tell my next layers of leadership, hey guys, we're going to try something. This might fail spectacular, and I hope it does early if it does, because we won't really know till we try something. I love controlled chaos. I guess that's my whole thing.
It's a good way of putting it. So bringing us to today, I understand 2.6 is all about speed and innovation. How has your idea of success evolved since those early roles? And are we talking climbing ladders or building rocket ships?
So early career, again, this is partially influenced probably by how we grew up after we came to the US. It was very, like I said previously, we lived very frugally. So it was, I think, and it is also for a lot of people, focused on, can I make a good salary? Can I make ends meet? Can I have the house of a white picket fence, which is traditional? I don't know if it's still nowadays, but was the traditional American dream, right? And when I was younger, I established, I knew what my dad was going through and what he was making. And I said, hey, if I can beat that, I will consider myself successful. Now it's completely different. Now has shifted for me very dramatically in the past, I would say even 10 years. to, well, I'm a father. I have two younger kids. I have two daughters. We work in the federal government space. So now it's about national security, national impact, making sure that future world is better than the current world, and that my kids and, my friends, even, pretty much anybody has the opportunities available to them to live out their life in a safe and, I guess, freedom of choice type of environment.
Amanda and I are both immigrants. So, what advice do you have to young people graduating from college? Maybe they have an immigrant background and coming to America and being an immigrant. I mean, you have to work twice as hard, right? What would you say would be your best advice for someone with an immigrant background who comes to America and is trying to break into a certain field that might not always be so crystal clear at first?
I mean, obviously, everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different. So I can only speak to my experiences. Back then, breaking in was a little bit hard. At times there was a language barrier, but I can't claim there was a language barrier by the time I graduated college. I mean, I was in America at that point for 15, 16 years, probably. So I spoke the language, but it's still just, for me personally, was having to obtain the security clearances to do my current job, right? It was like, hey, well, I went through the process of becoming naturalized and a U.S. citizen, and it was actually kind of wonky still back in the early 2000s when it comes to how the U.S. government sees dual citizenships. Because, okay, I became a U.S. citizen, but in the eyes of the U.S. government, am I still considered only a U.S. citizen or a dual citizen? And they didn't actually really know the answers. So I went through the process of having to revoke my Polish citizenship, which was kind of an arduous process because it was required. Nowadays, I think it's slightly more mainstreamed as they have more and more immigrants in the U.S. government over the last decade or so. So they mainstreamed the process a bit. They made it easier, what needs to occur and the process, but how to get it done. You do have to work a little bit harder. The other thing is you cannot, I think, participate in some of the rhetoric that can occur. Unfortunately, at times you will run into opposition from those in the workforce that don't believe you should be there, that for some reason think you are a lesser version of what somebody born in America can be. Unfortunately, that still occurs, and it's a sad fact. When you hear such rhetoric, you should correct it, but I would encourage people not to fully engage in it because you're just feeding the fire.
Yeah, that's wisely said, because I mean, I'm sure Amanda and I have both experienced that kind of rhetoric. And when you're younger, you don't know quite how to address it, or if you should address it. You're almost like a deer in a headlight situation, and you don't know how you're supposed to act, especially if it's from a superior, things like that. So I know that this is something that younger folks are struggling with. So as someone who's mentored teams across every environment or different environments, what's one piece of advice you would give to rookies about what they need to let go of? So almost like a don't instead of a do type of advice to grow as a leader.
Yeah, I'm noticing a trend, and it becomes more and more pronounced, every year for me. And on, the experience of working through the COVID pandemic over the last 2 years also exacerbated it. There is this over-reliance on technology right now as a replacement for interpersonal skills, unfortunately. If you're running teams, I'm not saying it cannot be done successfully in a virtualized environment, because I'm sure there's folks and teams and organizations that are making it work. But what I find oftentimes the Achilles heels, at least within our teams, can be is misunderstanding intent of communications that go out when they're not spoken in person, and you are not there in the same room with a person and can read the body language, which is oftentimes hard to do because when you're on a Zoom call or on a Teams call, not everybody turns on their camera. You don't see the facial cues. You don't see the reception. You don't see if they're paying attention. Oftentimes right now, a lot of up-and-coming engineers love to multitask. They'll join a meeting, but they're coding on the side, so they only hear every other word, and then they hear something that sets them off, and it causes a discussion or a dialogue about an issue that actually doesn't exist because they just weren't paying attention. But you couldn't pick up on that because no one's camera was on. It was kind of one of those blackboard, as I call them, Zoom calls. So investing in in-person dialogues and meetings provide huge opportunity for candid conversations, having those conversations. Everybody loves to share, especially now this is more, catered towards leaders. When you're having conversations with those that report to you, it's super easy to give good news. Giving critical feedback and critique to somebody is a much harder skill. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing is a lot of folks right now are shying away from that. They don't actually know how to deliver it in a way that is receptive or received by those they're speaking with in a non-defensive manner. And that's a challenge still. So learning those interpersonal skills, going through that training.
We have been hearing communication as one of the top, challenges, differences with rising professionals compared to those who have been in the field for a while. And yeah, it's very commonly brought up. So I actually wanted to go back as we were speaking about leaders. I was thinking about what you had mentioned during your startup experience, how, it was different not being the founder, but being employee one. And startups are still so popular today. A lot of rising professionals who are interested in the tech field seek out startups, for their careers. What are some character traits of a good leader that you've learned are so important, whether it's a startup or, a bigger established company? But what are some things that make a good leader today?
Again, I believe there is probably many ways to be a good leader. I can speak to what I personally believe and what has worked for me. I believe in a kind of a servant leadership model. I don't believe any leader should rule simply by the fact that they have a rank or a title. In my organization, I am successful. My business is successful because of everybody that works and shows up every day to work on a common problem as a team. I need to know that they believe in me, that I have their best interests in mind, that I look out for them so that they can focus on the actual technical execution rather than the administrative strategy planning, and believe that I'm doing that with the best intent of them, their families, their career progression in mind. I would not be successful at running 40 plus programs if I didn't have the people that and the workforce that can do that and feels empowered to do so, that feels empowered to have a sense of autonomy because they know I will provide top cover for them if we do make those mistakes, which we will make mistakes, because I understand that we're in a graceful environment right now, I'll say, where mistakes are welcome as long, make a mistake, but learn from it. Try not to do it again. You do it twice, cool. We really probably didn't learn correctly the first time. The third time is when we need to have a discussion. Why are we repeating the same mistake? But it's having those in-personal conversations, learning about the workforce. And it's hard as you scale. It was easy for me when I was running a team of 15. At 200, there are sometimes people that come into the organization and I know their name because I see that they joined, but I don't actually know about them. And trying to find time to meet with everybody is also a challenge because it's just unscalable at a certain point of view. So I have to now create the next layer of leadership and say, hey, here's how I would like our organizations from a, ethics, morality, culture perspective to work. Because this is why sometimes people come here is they value the fact that they're a human being, that we understand who they are and help them through the process in establishing their careers. But it's about the people for me.
Did you have any mentors or did you have people you could turn to get advice?
I did. I want to say probably not maybe for the first 5 years or so. Initially, it was, as a junior engineer or a junior computer software developer, when you first join, you're assigned a mentor, and it's usually a mid-level because that's your next kind of milestone. Hey, advance from junior to mid-level. And in some cases, the mid-level engineers are not really focused on the larger picture. They're still focused on hey, I have a job to you and now you're part of my job. So here's what you need to do your work better, be able to handle in an autonomous fashion, larger coding or engineering challenges. But about 5 years in, I joined the mentorship program that the corporation I was in offered. And I actually selected the CEO of a company for that organization as hey, I'd like to learn from you because one day I want to run my own company. What could you tell me? And it was a huge stretch because, I probably went to my boss's boss and say, hey, could you be my mentor? And he's like, who are you? And I said, here's where I am. Do you mind making the time? Let's meet for, half an hour or an hour once a month. And it was actually a very good experience for me. It was very unstructured, I think, for him because he was surprised by it, but he did take me up on the offer. But I think it also, and this wasn't my intention initially, but I think it pays huge dividends for my career development because now when my boss brought up my name when they had annual or semi-annual, career advancement discussions. The CEO who signs off ultimately on everything, he's like, oh, I know who this person is. Mm-hmm. I can put a face to the name. So that's how it worked out for me. I don't know if this is feasible for everybody as general advice. Hey, go find the CEO and ask him to be your mentor, because it might not work. But
yeah, if you're bold, I mean, I've mentioned this in a different episode, but my dad used to say, you can't get more than a no. So, be bold, and the fortune favors the bold. That's the saying. So maybe younger people can try and see. I mean, they can't get more than a no. And I think that people love giving back, and people love to mentor when they can and have the time. And often it's not a very structured like mentoring effort. It might be just going out to coffee with someone and taking the time to just chat for 15 minutes every day, or set up a meeting every now and then. So I think it's valuable. But those are kind of the things that I think if you're very junior in your career, you might feel intimidated walking up to a VP or a CXO and ask for their time. But I think that's a great tip.
What I would caution, though, against is if you are up-and-coming engineer, developer in the workforce, and you're looking now, find it and identify a mentor. I would say don't just shoot necessarily for title or rank. Actually observe the person and what their lifestyle is. Because right now I'm on the other flip side. I'm trying to develop a mentorship program, or to make it better, the one we have. Mm-hmm. And what I'm sometimes find myself wondering about and questioning is, okay, I have some really, really smart people, but I feel like they would make very bad mentors because they're workaholics. And what are workaholics going to teach up and coming people? To be workaholics, mm-hmm. because they kind of want to aspire and imitate the behavior, or, kind of shadow the mentor. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the best thing. Burnout is a real thing that can happen in our profession, because mm-hmm. there is ebbs and flows in the workplace for how much effort needs to be done on a given week. Sometimes it's the proposals and the activities that go beyond your 40-hour work week. And not everybody's ready for it. And, I've experienced folks that thought they were ready. They jumped in and they suddenly worked an 80-hour week, and they repeated it again. And the next thing I know is like, hey, I can't sustain it. I'm thinking about starting a family. My wife never sees me, or my spouse never sees me. Like, I'm going to have to find a new job. And I'm like, we never had to do this. Like, what happened? And mm-hmm. on reflection, it's like how this was supposed to be a mentorship opportunity. And I think to the individual, it might have felt like you must do this or else from a career advancement perspective. And that means we just failed, and we potentially lost somebody really good because we threw them into a situation where they felt they had to execute for a sustained at a very high level, and it just wore on them.
That's really good to be aware of. I think a lot of people coming into this field think they have to work all the time after hours to get to where they want to be. But it doesn't have to be that way a lot of times. So,
no, I'll say the one thing I always did, actually, this is a personal probably trait of mine or personality trait, is as soon as I got promoted into a job, the first thing I asked, and if I had a mentor, I would ask my mentor, how do I replace myself? Like, this is day one, but like, you just got promoted. What do you mean, how do you replace someone? Like, I want to know, like, how do I automate this job? So I have more freedom to engage with people, because I still believe the dialogues of folks with the workforce is very important. And any organization that's growing, you need to be able to scale. How do you scale? You create more of yourself. This is a potentially another mistake that, some folks might be making, is they worry that if they teach other people to do their job, then they're no longer relevant and they're going to get replaced. And what I've experienced as a leader is like, I love those people because that allows scale and growth. You have very good strengths. Please teach them to the workforce, to your peers, to those that report to you. And then you can do more. It's kind of like this ever-growing pyramid.
What traits are you looking for when you have someone in front of you and you're considering hiring them? What do you think is most important right now?
If I have them in front of them, like from an interview perspective, I mean, work ethic is very important right now. Accountability. Those are slightly hard to gauge during an interview, because you ask somebody a question and they'll potentially provide answers, but you don't know if that's on paper, in theory, the answers that they were taught to provide and they know are the right answers versus what their actual behavioral patterns once they're an employee are going to be. I mean, the values or skills that I wish, kind of every person had is accountability, self-reflection, honestly. Know your limits and don't be afraid to be vulnerable about discussing them with your leadership, so you can play to your strengths and you can kind of work on the weaknesses. The ability to decompose problems into smaller parts. This is probably more mid-career into more senior career, is the ability to take a larger program that seems like a behemoth of a problem. Like, hey, our job is to climb this mountain. And you're like, I don't even know where to start. But if you decompose it into saying, hey, well, we're going to have to take zigzags or switchbacks to climb this mountain, there's probably 5 different ascents we could do at the very top, and do the risk analysis and the trade-off analysis for different, hey, we could do it this way, we could do it this way, this way. And if you break it down into, well, first we got to do A, then B, then C, kind of a crawl, walk, run mentality, that problem doesn't seem as enormous, as untangible as it did when you look at it just from the get-go. Focus on the intermediate steps.
So it's been a lot of really good advice for people coming up in this field. Truly, yeah, we've talked a lot about, I think, a lot of tips and things that you really only learn from experience that can be really helpful. I'm interested, before we wrap up, to know, what is the most chaotic startup thing that you've kept doing at 2.6?
I feel like I keep trying to reinvent or restructure how the paradigm between people leadership, program management, and technical execution, this triangle of the 3 things that make a successful program, is organized. Historically, everybody is chasing this unicorn that we refer to as a triple threat, which is somebody who's very technically smart and dive deep with our customers technically, is also very good at managing a program and the risk associated with requirements, deadlines, staffing a program, managing the money associated with your cost and expenditures. And then as well as business development, saying, okay, I'm executing successfully, but are you growing the next thing? Are you selling? Are you expanding? And it's rare to find somebody who has all 3. So we're trying to kind of break them into the 3 separate pillars that make up what you need to be a growing company, and saying, are they separate skills? Are they inherent skills? How do we fix the reporting chains? And really, you mentioned before, communication tends to become a thing. How do these people communicate successfully? So if I have 2 folks approach a customer, they know that, hey, this guy was there yesterday and they talked to the same person. This guy going in today should probably be aware of that. So when they mention it, it's not a deer in the headlight look for the second person coming in, because it tells the customer, like, hey, internally, you guys don't communicate very well. Like, maybe you don't have your act together. Mm-hmm. So it's that information dissemination and collaboration amongst the 3 kind of pillars of a successful program. I keep flipping it on its head, and I'm sure some of my staff hates it because I keep trying to reinvent. Can it function better? Mm-hmm. And I'm still trying to answer that question.
Well, I'm also curious to know, you mentioned work ethic, you mentioned burnout. So what do you do when you don't work? I know you're a dad. What do you do when you're not in the office or when you're focused on work?
So I'm trying to get back into more athletic, kind of sports that I used to do. I used to play a lot of volleyball. I used to play soccer. So now my youngest is playing soccer. So I'm doing a little bit of the sideline parenting, coaching, as we call it. I actually signed up and volunteered to be a coach for the recreation league that my older daughter was playing in. That was a wonderful, I think, experience. It's getting the middle schoolers, some of them first time ever touching a volleyball. Like, how do I instill the passion, the fundamentals? Because good building blocks are good building blocks. You need good fundamentals before, like, everybody wants to do the most advanced. Oh, let's jump, serve, spike thing. And I'm like, before we go there, like, we need to work about like the foot skills, the agility, the mobility, hand-eye coordination. So I participate in those. I unfortunately am one of those folks that loves programming. So I don't actually get to do much programming at work, even though we do a lot of it as a company. My focus more on strategy. Unfortunately, some of it is Excel spreadsheets, as we often refer to it, is the logistics and the administration behind making sure that work exists for folks. There's alignments, there's a forward path and momentum that's maintained. So when I get home sometimes, and I love coding, and right now I am fascinated by all the advances and leaps in AI. That, I'm sure if you read the news, you hear about the latest models and how we're going to replace our workforce. So I dabble in that. I'm trying to have an AI system write an AI itself and see how well it does.
Wow. Cool.
Wow. Keep us updated on that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. What are you going to use it for?
I don't know what I'm going to use it for.
Automate more? Replace yourself?
Yeah, replacing himself.
Yeah, I mean, I am not one of those that believes that eventually, the Terminator theory is going to happen and an AI will replace us all and decide humans are a mistake and we all should be scared. I think it's just, time seems to be the biggest actual limiting factor right now in my life. I feel that this is probably true of a lot of senior executives. When you first start, it tends to be about money, finances, making ends meet. Now it's like, okay, there are so many things I could do and so many passions I've kind of grew and hobbies I joined as I went through my career. I wish I had more time to invest myself into all of them. So, hey, if I can replace some of the less favorable parts of my job with automation, I am happy.
Do you have the technical skills to build a robot? Maybe I'm envisioning like a Tesla bot playing volleyball with you when your kids can't.
So our kind of focus in the company right now, my business unit, is actually primarily focused on taking things apart and learning how they work.
Oh.
So oftentimes we know the limitations of their foundational programming. So we really take things apart to break them. I would love to obtain a robot, take it apart and seeing how I can make it do things it's not supposed to do. But, as you do that rigor and that like introspection into any embedded system, you learn how they work. So you also learn how to build one and like, hey, here's how I would build it and how I would make it better. So could we do it? We probably could do it. Could I personally do it? Yes, I probably could. It comes down to, the internet is such a wonderful resource. Now it's just finding the good advice on the internet from the bad advice, because it's, there is a lot of, unfortunately, AI generated content, which isn't always correct. And you have to learn to kind of filter.
Yeah. Well, maybe next time we'll be sitting down with you and your robot and we can ask them a couple questions.
I cannot guarantee
Never know.
Will agree to what they say, but okay.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for sharing your perspective with us, your wisdom, for reminding us a little bit of the days of dial-up modems, and for sharing the perspective that you really can only get from living it and surviving some rookie mistakes. So we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Rookies to Rockstars. GovCon doesn't come with a playbook, but these stories might be the next best thing. Follow the show, share it with someone still figuring it out, and connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you.